everyone. In a previous video I had showed all of you how to install fret slots or how to cut your own fret slots. And what I never made my way around to in the previous video was how to actually install the frets and how to crown the frets and everything. So that's what I'm going to do in today's video. Today we're building a lovely 5-string banjo. This video really is just going to work for somebody who's working on instruments with a flat fretboard. A lot of 6-string guitars will have a radius fretboard. But for instruments like ukuleles, banjos, I think mandolins, I'm not exactly sure. A lot of those instruments, they just have a flat fretboard. And what that means is there's no curvature, there's no radius. The purpose of the radius, for those of you that don't know, is to make it more ergonomical when you're barring chords. So for example, if you need to hold down all 4 strings or 6 strings at the same time, then it makes it easier because your finger naturally has a better position with a curve rather than it being perfectly straight. But with instruments like ukulele and banjo, especially nylon string instruments, it's not so hard to hold down bars like that. And just 4 strings, it's really not that much of an issue, and some people don't even notice a difference in performance. And in fact, a lot of classical guitars that have nylon strings, they'll just have a flat fretboard, and it's because it's a lot easier to hold down nylon strings as opposed to steel strings. So, yeah, most banjos these days still made with a flat fretboard. Nothing wrong with it. And most ukuleles are made that way too. Tenor guitars, a lot of instruments out there. Like I said, the reason for the curvature or the radius is when they started putting steel, I think it started when they started putting steel guitar strings on, and people found out that it was really difficult to hold down certain chords with all 6 strings and with the strings being steel. But with some of the other instruments, that was never so much of an issue. So this tutorial is just going to work for people that are working on a flat fretboard. It's not going to work if your fretboard has a radius. If you're planning on making a fretboard that has a radius, this tutorial is not really going to work for that. So I started this video outside because it was such nice weather today. But I think eventually we're going to move inside because my process involves wood glue, and I think out here in this really dry, sunny weather, the wood glue is going to dry faster than I want it to. It's going to make the dry time a lot quicker, so eventually I think we're going to have to move inside. But I'm just going to give you the quick rundown on my process, exactly what I do. One of the benefits of my method is 95% of the time I find I don't have to do any fret leveling. So these are the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need your fret material, obviously. I actually like to get 2 sizes of frets. I like to get a taller fret because I do a 0th fret rather than resting the strings on the nut of the instrument. I like to do a 0th fret that's taller so that way it gives just a little bit of distance from the strings from the first frets up the fretboard. So this one's actually a different size fret from the rest of these. These are the main frets we're going to use, and then this is going to be the 0th fret. That's the way I prefer to do it. So fret material is number one, obviously. You're going to need a hammer. Now, I like to use a hammer with plastic ends here. And the reason why I prefer plastic is because it has, I guess you could also use wood, if you have the right type of wood. But I like plastic because it's harder than like a rubber mallet or a leather mallet. So, but it's still, it won't damage the frets and it won't damage the fretboard like a steel or iron hammer would. And that's the reason why I like that. It has, you know, the right amount of strength and it has the right amount of give to where it's not going to damage your material. You're also going to need some fret clippers. I've gone through about 30 instruments with these and they're pretty worn out. They're still going though. So I'm going to either replace them or I'm going to learn how to sharpen them soon. I think they're made out of a really, really hard steel. So I might need to use diamond plates to sharpen this. I'm not sure. And then I like to use Titebond to secure the frets into the fretboard. A lot of people, I'm just suspecting that maybe a lot of people will say, no, don't use Titebond, never use Titebond. If you ever need to replace your frets, you're going to tear the grain out. I have had to replace frets after gluing the frets in with Titebond. It's important to remember the Titebond actually is more of a filler, filling in any empty gaps that might be in the fretboard. And that potentially creates a better tone. You don't get what they call dead frets. And I like it because, if you actually heat up the frets before you pull them out, like if you ever need to do a fret replacement job, if you heat the frets up with a soldering iron, it's actually no issue at all. The fret comes free of the glue entirely. So I've had no issues with that. I'll just heat up the fret with a soldering iron, and then I'll pull it out with these pliers, and I have no grain tear out on the fretboard. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to go into detail about each step and exactly how I do it. But first I want to just spend about a minute just to go over just like an overview of my whole process. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to clip all our fret material for each one. Don't install them yet. You want them to be clipped slightly bigger because later on we're going to go in and we're going to, after they're installed, we're going to clip off the excess. And I'll explain later on in the video why I do all these things. But right now I just want to tell you what I do, just to give you an overview. So, like I said, clip all your fret material ahead of time. Then what you're going to do is you're going to insert wood glue, wet wood glue, into each of the slots using Titebond. I like Titebond too. And the way I do that is I actually dip an old guitar string. I'll dip the old guitar string in the glue, and then I'll put the guitar string through the slot, and then that puts the wood glue inside there without making the whole fretboard really messy. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take your material after wood glue is in the slot, and you're going to take your plastic hammer and you're going to pound it in there. Not too hard though. After you pound it in there and you have all your frets installed, you're just going to clip off the excess really quick, as fast as you can. Remember, we have glue time to consider. After that, we're going to take this over to a granite slab, also like a steel a thick steel workbench could also work if it's perfectly flat. You want a perfectly flat surface that's stronger than your board material. I highly recommend going to like a granite graveyard, a place that sells granite and countertops, and see if you can pick up some smaller scrap pieces that would be long enough for your work. I'm fortunate enough to have a really nice granite slab, and it has perfect flatness, perfect straightness, and it works perfectly for this. You don't want to pound your frets all the way in. They're just going to be partially pounded in with the wood glue under it, and then you're going to take it to your granite surface, turn it upside down, and you're going to clamp it down to the granite. Now what that does is that ensures that all the frets are going to be clamped down to the exact same level because they're all pressed up against a perfectly flat surface. I hope that makes sense. Please, if anybody has any questions, I'll either answer them later in the next part of this video, or if you watch the whole video and you still have more questions, feel free to shoot me questions either through Facebook or through the YouTube channel. Yeah. And here you can see I have all the frets set up for the whole entire board except for the 0th fret. I leave the 0th fret for the last part of the whole fretting process just because it's going to be at a slightly, ever so slightly higher level than all the other frets, and that will create issues when you go to clamp your fretboard down to your flat solid surface. Here I'm pouring some glue onto the backside of an old worn out piece of sandpaper, and I'm taking my guitar string and dipping it into the glue. Take the guitar string with the glue and slide it into the slot until the slot is filled with wood glue. And then you're going to go ahead and take your fret for that position and pound it in. And I like to do about maybe 4 or 5 slots at a time. Again, you have the wood glue in there, and then you're just going to go ahead and lightly tap it from one end to the other. Don't pound it too hard. We just want to get the frets securely into their slots. We don't actually want to pound them all the way down because later on we're going to clamp it down to the granite slab or the flat solid surface that you're working with, and that's actually going to be what presses the frets down into their permanent position. And as you can see, I'm doing about 3, 4, 5 at a time, as much as I feel comfortable with in the moment. And I'll go ahead and pound those frets in. And then afterwards, I'll come in with the clippers and I'll just clip off the excess. Don't worry about the crowning on the sides yet. We're going to worry about that after everything's put into place. If you have an overflow of glue on the fretboard, a damp cloth will do the trick on getting that glue off of the surface of the fretboard.
So now you're going to set up the neck onto a flat surface, or the fretboard onto a flat surface. And I have these poplar blocks that I cut specifically for this. The reason why I use poplar is because it's hard enough to where you can apply clamping pressure and it still gives a lot of pressure from the fretboard onto the flat surface that you're working with. In this place, it's a slab of granite. But it's not so hard that it will dent or mark the neck. The wood is still soft enough to where it will, if you clamp too hard, it will damage the piece of poplar rather than the beautiful neck that you're working on. And here you can see I pretty much grabbed all the clamps in my whole shop, and I tried my best to apply equal pressure on each of the clamps. So right now it's clamped up to a flat surface, and so I would say have it clamped for at least 10 hours, and then afterwards you'll take all the clamps off, and every fret should be perfectly level. Now, sometimes I would say about maybe 5% of the time they don't come out perfectly level due to uneven clamping pressure. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fret rocker. And if you don't know what a fret rocker is, basically it's a object with straight edges on it, where you can set it over 3 frets at a time. And if one fret is higher than the other, you should be able to feel the fret rocker rock back and forth between the 2 lower frets that are on either side of the high fret. And that's how you can tell if the frets are perfectly flat with each other or not. If you don't have a fret rocker, don't fret. You can buy one for an extremely affordable price. StewMac also sells some really nice ones. You can even make them. Now, sometimes you will have uneven clamping pressure towards the very top fret. That's actually the most common one. So sometimes that ends up being a little bit lower than the rest of the frets that come out. So in this case, that is what actually happens. So right now I'm heating it up with a soldering iron so that way I can pull it out. I found the cleanest way to pull it out is to take a very sharp, cheap chisel, make sure that it's flat and it doesn't have a curve in the edge. And you're just gonna dig it under the fret there and sort of pry it out. And here we have the same process as before. You're just going to take wood glue, insert it into the slot, take your fret material, insert that in with the wood glue. Some glue is going to squeeze out a little bit, and that's okay. That's easy to clean. And instead of clamping it to a flat surface like we did last time, because it's just one fret that is not level with the rest, I'm just going to take my plastic mallet and I'm going to very gently and carefully hammer that fret in, checking each time to see if it's level with the 2 frets that are next to it. And once I can see that it is level, then that's perfectly fine. Also, because it's the first fret, it's actually okay if it's just slightly higher than the next 2 frets down. Now here I have some 220 grit sandpaper. It's meant for a disc sander or a random orbital sander. But the Velcro pad on the back got worn out. So now I'm repurposing it to create the beveled profile on each of the frets. That makes it more ergonomic and comfortable for people to hold. And after I've used the sanding block to create that bevel, I'm just going to freehand it. And I'm going to use just freehand, sometimes with only one finger, sometimes with multiple fingers. And actually, this is good enough for rounding off the sharp edges of the frets that can be hard on some sensitive hands. I find that the soft pads of your fingers actually can wrap around the edges of the bevel that you created on the frets and sort of round over those sharp edges, so that way it's more ergonomic for the player. By the end of this, you're going to end up with some metal particles. Sometimes I like to tape the fretboard and the neck off so that way it has a cleaner look. In this case, I'm giving this instrument more of an aged look, so it's perfectly fine to have those particles there. And I'll rub it down with oil to finish it off, because after the sanding process on the edges, you will end up with some bare wood. So I'm going to re-oil it again. And as I said at the beginning of this video, for that last fret, for the 0th fret, I like to have it slightly higher than all the other frets. And the way I achieve that is I have a different type of fret with a higher tang. But the same result can be achieved if you just cut that 0th fret slot. Make a shallower cut on it and don't cut it as deep as the rest of the frets. You can have the same effect that way. That's really the last step in the process, is just installing that 0th fret.
Down at your feet, O Lord, is the most high place. In your presence, Lord, we seek your face. We seek your face. There is no higher calling, no greater honor than to bow and kneel before your throne. I'm amazed at your glory, embraced by your